Hello, Sharks fans. I'm Dan Rusanowski. You are listening to another Teal Town podcast.
Yes, you are indeed. Thank you, Dan Rusanowski. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Teal Town Live. This is your live and interactive draft post-game show. It is I, Eric Kerr. We are on the air. We're on a little late, and we'll explain it to you. And now, reasoning behind this all is that we, as essentially as media members now, can't go on until that last pick goes off the air. So we'll have Kevin Lacey joining me in a few minutes to break down something wicked cool in the NHL draft and see how that's great and stuff. So, it's going to be one of those nights where, really, really probably the quietest draft first round we've ever seen. At least I haven't seen in quite some time. I mean, so Jerry. Oh, Jerry, it's like you knew. It's like there's only just one of me until Kevin gets here. Jerry F in the chat. Hey, Puck Guy, where was the draft taking place? The draft was taking place in Vancouver. Yes. Rogers Arena full to capacity tonight for the NHL draft. Yes, Christine, this is your San Jose draft watch party. So if the Sharks did have a pick, we probably have Doug Wilson or Tim Burke say, good evening, everyone. We would like to welcome those of you who are watching at our draft watch party on tealtownusa.com. We want to thank you all for watching. And hey, you know what? We're going to have a good time tonight. We're not only going to talk about the draft, we're going to talk about the rule changes that are essentially inspired by the San Jose Sharks. So there are multiple ways to interact with us. You can chat with us and fellow Sharks fans in the YouTube chat on the page or the app. You can use the hashtag tealtownusa or just follow us on all of our social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, SoundCloud, and the YouTube channel. So once Mr. Lacey gets here, we will break down the draft, but we'll go over a few things. Let's talk about the home and home. Now we'll kick off the Sharks' 29th season in the NHL. The Sharks will begin their season on October 2nd at Vegas on a Wednesday night. Gee, I wonder if it's going to be nationally televised. Yeah, this one's going to be an interesting one, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but I love how the Rocket foot fetish in Vegas with the case of the Krebs. I think Vegas with the case of the salts. That's all. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see why were two of the Jerry F in the chat. Why were two of the teams at the draft tonight wearing white jerseys and the rest in color? Just personal preference. The Sharks have kind of changed it up all over the place. I remember when Timo got drafted in 2015, he had a white jersey. I remember in 2013, the Sharks went with their black jersey. They also they've also done their teal. I mean, Josh Norris, our most recent draft pick in the first round, was very capable of that. Same with Merkley, if I'm not mistaken, last year. So it varies by team to team on that one. So we'll see on that on there. So yeah, 2015 was the only year I watched. I think 2015 is also the last time they really had a very significant pick in the higher end, which is very rare for the Sharks because they are deep into the playoffs. In the playoffs, we saw a lot of controversial calls. A lot of them went the Sharks' way. If you want to look at that frame. So here's what's going on here. So the league has kind of got together and we got the press release because we're that kind of special to talk about the rule changes upcoming for the next season. And it's going to be quite interesting to see how this plays out because, I wonder, what this is going to happen. So the new category with the expansion of the coaches challenge, in addition to coaches challenge for offside and interference on the goaltender, a third category will now allow for the coaches challenge on a goal calls on the ice that follow plays in the offensive zone that should have resulted in a play stoppage but did not. I wonder what they could be talking about. This change will allow changes of plays that may involve pucks that hit the spectator netting, pucks that are high stick to a teammate in the offensive zone, pucks that have gone out of play or subsequently touched in the offensive zone, and hand passes that proceed without a play stoppage and ultimately conclude in the scoring of a goal. Plays that will entail discretionary stoppages, like penalties, will not be subject to coach's challenge. So this is going to be interesting to see. Coach's challenges for these types of plays and for offside challenges will only be available if the puck does not come out of the attacking zone between the time missed uh, and the time the goal is scored. So I guess it doesn't come out of the zone, then they're all hunky. If it comes out of the zone, then it's not going to happen. So penalties for unsuccessful challenges, you basically have the coaches challenges can be made will no longer be limited to the base of availability of the team's timeout. That's going to be an interesting one because PDB used to go to that immensely early on for a longer timeout. Teams will be permitted to exercise a coach's challenge at any time, but with escalating consequences for unsuccessful challenges. Those will include, a minor penalty for a delay of game on the first one and a double minor for each additional one onward. So that's going to be an interesting one to talk about it. The Situation Room in Toronto will continue to be responsible for initiating the video review in the final minute of regulation time and overtime, as well as continue to have final authority over all review decisions with input and consultation with the on ice officials and a former official staffed in the Situation Room. So basically, this is kind of what many people were asking for right after the infamous hand pass. What do you guys think about this? I mean, this seems like this. Yeah, Rocket's already booing. Uh, uh, so it should be like. Um, so I think it was a bet. Okay, let's go through. Anthony Sanchez trades are on hold until the salary cap is agreed upon. Well, that's going to be interesting to see if that's how we're going to work it. And I don't blame him too. A lot of things you can't do. I mean, unrestricted free agents are going to be able to permit to talk to other teams on the 23rd. And I don't know how you can do that when you have a number of people waiting to go. So, so we'll see on that one. Let me make sure, Kevin. Making sure Kevin is getting close. He's recapping and going to break down the first round for us. Not too much will be going on. No. He's getting caught up on that. Um, rules look good. Love. Um, let's see here. Where we go? Oh, Marty C. There we go. Rules look good. Love that you can just keep challenging, but get double minors if you're wrong. Hey, and that's adds on to the whole thing of it. I kind of like that because now you're going to have that timeout when you desperately need it whenever it comes up. I mean, PDB is known for using the timeout on a critical power play. Uh, He's also known to use it late in the game, like many coaches do. So this is kind of interesting how that'll work out. So a lot of talk about Marlowe. We'll get to Marlowe, but I just can't see this happening for the Sharks. I really, really can't. It just is like, you know, it, how much money will he want to take to come back here? And I know he's got his home out here. His wife Christina and the kids have only really known San Jose. So VGK coverage. Good to see you, bud. Hey guys, our teams made them change the rules. That's pretty cool. LOL. Yeah, I mean, cool, but at the same time, it's like really, and that's the quite interesting one. And the review, we didn't get to that part. There is a second part to the entire rule book here, but referees reviewing major match penalties and double minor high sticking penalties. Referees will now be required to conduct an on ice video review for all major, non fighting, of course, and match penalties they assess for the purpose of confirming the penalty, reducing it to a 2-minute penalty. The referees shall not have the option to rescind the penalty altogether, which is good. I think if you're going to call it, you got to call it. For the double minor of high sticking, the refs will have the ability to conduct an on ice video review to confirm or not the original call on the ice where the stick caused an apparent injury and it was actually the stick of the player being penalized. And we've seen that before. I think I remember one of the games in the Colorado series where Timo gets high sticked. It was actually friendly fire and they missed it, or the one, what was it? Help me out here, gang. Was it game 7 against Colorado where a goal was going to be, put in there? So that'll be interesting one. In the VGK coverage. You know what? I I would freaking, you know, we're about to hang up a 2018-19 the NHL apologized to us banner. And you know what? And if we wanted to, we could get the rules changed to anytime Vegas steps on the ice, they win. Yeah, and see, that's the thing that scares me the most is that if one team has that much say, um, that's very scary, and it makes me very scary to have Seattle come into the league in a couple of years if they're able to, because there might be another lockout. I mean, it's just craziness. What could be happening in later this season. Other rule changes that were approved: the helmets. Players whose helmet comes off during play must exit the playing surface rather than what it used to be, just keep playing out there. Retrieve and replace his helmet properly on his head with or without his chin strap fastened. So essentially, if it falls off, you can put it back on properly. If the chin strap's not on, they're not going to dock you for that. A player who's making a play on the puck or who is in position, um, or who is in position to make an immediate play on the puck at the time it comes off, shall be given a reasonable opportunity to complete the play before exiting the ice or retrieving and replacing his helmet. Failure to comply will result in a minor penalty being assessed to the offending player. A player who intentionally removes an opponent's helmet during play shall also be assessed a minor penalty for roughing. So that I'm glad they add that last part in because I could totally see people behind the play when nobody's there and they just rip off the helmet and then they get called for it. Wouldn't be surprised if that happens though, but we'll see on the whole that. So that there's that. Also in the rule changes, let's see here. We have the line changes for defensive team. The defensive team will not be permitted a line change when the goalie freezes the puck on any shot from outside the center red line. Similarly, if the actions of the skater of the defensive team cause a stoppage by unintentionally dislodging the net from its moorings, the defensive team will not be permitted to make a line change. In both of those instances, the offensive team will have the choice of which end zone dot faceoff will take place. This one's kind of interesting. And we've all heard AJ talk about, what is it? What was it? Cadobin, taking the net off this morning's, um, and yeah, you won't get the defensive team to make a line change. It'll be interesting to see on that. However, another one that came out tonight, or today rather, was the awarded goal. If a goalpost is deliberately displaced by a goalkeeper during the course of a breakaway, a goal will be rewarded to the non-offending team. And this kind of refers to me. It kind of reminds me of the whole. What was it? Henrik Lundqvist against Pittsburgh one time. He just threw the net off this morning's, and that's something that you know, something that you could see them and take a little liberty of and award a goal. So, uh, continuing onward, face-offs falling and icing to begin a power play. Now, one of the what it would happen before is, like say the Sharks had a power play, but they had iced the puck. The face-off would be at center ice. Well, now following and icing as well as at the beginning of any power play, the offensive team will have the choice of which end zone dot of the face-off they can take place. So they'll get it back in there and they'll have their own choice. Uh, so it'll be interesting there. Puck out of bounds when the attacking team is responsible for the puck going out of play in the attacking zone. In all instances, the face-off will be conducted at one of the two face-off dots in the attacking zone. So again, will be interesting to see some different twists to these rules, and should be interesting to see how they're permitted. So let's hear in the chat what you think about this one. Um, uh, good night, VGK coverage. Talking about the Sharks. Well, Satan, are you from New Jersey? That's how I can put it. Or are you Miroslav Shatan? That's how I was trying to say. You got to think Melker Carlson's is going next, right? I don't know. I do find it interesting that Jonas Donskoy is going to test unrestricted free agency. I think after the year that he had struggling, he's a very capable player who can get 20 goals in this league, but it seems like he's going to test out free agency and see, but he hasn't ruled out that he's going to be making a return to the Sharks. So I would hold off on that.
Like
I know his wife
who's been fed up with,
I believe,
Mr.
has some
Coach
Minnesota ties,
Peter
or not his
DeBoer.
wife. His fiance has some Minnesota ties, but she was living out here, so it'll be interesting to see. Will I be bummed that Donskoy is leaving? A little bit. I mean, he has scored one of the biggest goals in Sharks franchise history. I mean, the Game 3 winner against the Penguins in the Cup final. So we'll see on that. So Kevin, I believe I think you are on. I think I'm going to have you jump over and I can fix my audio in just a jiffy, but I can't hear you. But I will
Can the
try to
viewers
make
hear
sure
me?
I can hear you in just a jiffy. So, Kevin, now that you are here, I'll let you have the reins a little bit with the proceedings tonight in a surprisingly quiet first round.
Well, thanks, Eric. Hopefully the chat can hear me. I'm still waiting for a response from somebody because apparently Eric cannot hear me right now. Thank you, chat, for that. But yes, I'm Kevin Lacey, and I'm feeling a little bit better, but just going to be audio only for the time being. The comment that I was trying to make about Jonas Donskoy is about him potentially leaving seems to me, well, when Peter DeBoer is constantly calling you out in the media and benching you or giving you 7 minutes a night on the fourth line for a guy who had character issues in Finland when he was, granted, when he was very young, we're talking 17, 18, 19 years old, definitely a boy who still needed to mature at that time, but nevertheless still has a little bit of that reputation. I'm not surprised at all that Jonas Donskoy is leaving. Not whatsoever. So I definitely wish him the best because I do like him a lot. When he's on, I just think that he seems to drop in consistency from the start of the year to the end of the year, time and time again. So we'll see where he winds up. But Eric, I gotta think he's out of here for good.
Yeah, definitely.
You can hear me now? Is that
I
correct?
can hear
Because
you
I
now.
can't hear you, buddy.
What? Oh,
But go
goody.
ahead. I'll try and resolve it on my end. I have not discussed the draft yet, by the way.
All right. Well, while we try and figure this out, oh, the beauties of live YouTube television, folks. Uh, it's one of those things where, well, you know, it's beautiful, beautiful technology when it works, folks, and when it doesn't, well, they say. So, you guys can hear both of us. We can't hear each other, so that's the tough part. Um, the tough part for us. So hopefully that'll get resolved in just a jiffy while he makes his way on here. Let's get back to comments in the chat. Rob Ivan saying we'll need Lacey once Mad Bum and Will Smith are traded. Yeah, that's gonna be tough. Anthony Sanchez, I expect Marlowe to be back in San Jose. Too much smoke for it not to happen. It's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough to do for that one. Jerry F, no real trades to announce. Yeah, that one's tough. Factor Fiction, Toronto buys out Marlowe if a trade fails to materialize. I would say that's a fact, Rob, because I with all the speculation going on, and we saw some talking of Kyle Dubas talking to a few GMs tonight uh, about making offers. Apparently, PK Subban and Tyson Berry are up for availability in this in here. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, PK Subban and of all people, PK Subban's being linked to Vancouver right now. So Vancouver believes that they've turned the tide as the Canucks owner Francesco Aquilini, uh, suggests earlier today. I'm not completely sold on that. Is Jacob Markstrom your go-to goalie? Is it is is Brock Besser going to re-sign? Elias Pettersson, got the Calder. We'll see about that. I don't know what there. Kevin, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, which is
On
terrific.
board.
Sweet. Awesome. But I was kind of talking to you about the Canucks in that sense. Do you think they're a playoff team where they're at right now? Or
No, I don't think so. But I don't think we're going to have any Canucks fans listening to this. If you are listening to this, thank you. I don't think the Canucks fans need to be concerned about their team right now, whether or not they're making the playoffs or not. I mean,
right.
This is a team that absolutely needs to continue the upward trend in their build, and I think Elias Pettersson was a huge, him and Brock Besser over the last 2 years have been a huge step in the right direction to righting that ship. They have a ton of young defensive prospects who I like, and that's going to be dangerous down the line. But they might be a team where if they were to make the playoffs next year, for example, that might almost regress them in the sense of they might get in over their heads, or it might push the envelope. I feel like Vancouver's one of those organizations, no matter who the GM is, where they get a sniff of the playoffs and then it's, let's sacrifice the future for winning right now, even though we really don't have much of an opportunity to win.
Do you kind of see that like maybe Edmonton and maybe Toronto in that sense, where they
Toronto, absolutely.
Yeah.
Edmonton has those moments. Yeah, I could see that. I don't know. Maybe, I mean, those are obviously all three Canadian teams, and it might just be the pressures of the Canadian media getting to these organizations time and time again. I don't know. It's all, just my speculation there, but
Yeah, so something will be interesting to see because many people are talked about. We talked about Calgary. We've seen Edmonton. Um, we've seen Arizona make strides, and it's going to be interesting to see how the Pacific plays out next year if everybody's on full cylinders. So
Definitely, definitely. But I do think Vancouver is a team who you should consider for a playoff, at least in the hunt.
yeah,
Because
definitely.
even this year, there's so much parity in the league now. Where Vancouver is a team that everyone would have laughed if someone had said, "Oh, Vancouver's a playoff potential team this year." Everyone would have laughed, and then they were. And even when they fell off the second half of the season, they were still in the hunt. Part of that was because nobody wanted the seventh and eighth playoff spots in the West. But nevertheless, they were still in the hunt there. And so I think we're at this point where you can't count anybody out unless you're Edmonton in perennial rebuild or the teams that just absolutely suck like LA and Anaheim did this year. Other than that, you're always in the hunt, I think, at this point.
Right. And Perry getting bought out in Anaheim, a little bit of a surprise to me, but it's something they had to do. All right, so let's get at it. The reason why we were part of here, round one of this draft. Obviously, the first two picks we kind of expected, but what did you think?
Yeah, absolutely, Eric. This was a very odd draft to try and pick because, really, I mean, this was the Jack Hughes Capo Caco draft. And for me, Alex Turcotte was easily the third overall pick, even though he was drafted fifth by LA. So that kind of sucks for us Sharks fans. I thought Turcotte far and away should have been the third, or was the third best prospect. And Hockey Jerk and I have, and Ian Reed,
Yep.
all of us there and Teal Tinted Glasses, we talked about how this is really an 8 to 10 player draft on the whole, and then everything after that really drops off. Now there are players who you can sprinkle in there that are like, ooh, that guy's got a lot of potential. Like, for example, Connor McMichael, who was drafted 25th overall by Washington.
Right.
Just they were talking about him being a Swiss Army knife, and the scouting reports I've seen and the highlight packages and whatnot that I saw, it's he's got a lot there. He really is a Swiss Army knife. He's got a lot there. There's really nothing in his game that I look at a guy like Connor McMichael and say there's flaws there. But yet I still had him 18th on my board. And then the guys in front of him, 6, 7 guys ahead of him, I'm like, nah, those are nah. This year just wasn't a deep draft to me. And so tomorrow, I mean, obviously I'm jumping ahead here, but tomorrow is going to be really interesting to watch. And by interesting, I mean it could be just flat out boring. because I mean there's just such a drastic talent drop off. But you never know. I mean, you get picks like Joe Pavelski there in the 7th round yeah, not a deep draft, and suddenly it becomes an exceptionally deep draft late, in hindsight. So we'll see how this goes. There's my Will See for those of you watching Teal Tinted Glasses. That's our new drinking game. The Will Sees of the off season.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but sorry, I kind of rambled there. But what I wanted to say to you, Eric, here is 4 of my top 5 went in the first 4 picks. My next 5 guys, 5 through 9, they were drafted 9th, 12th, 15th, 10th, and 17th. So it was just all over the board tonight. And I think that was what I took most, was just, it was so unpredictable, and it's all just a matter of preference.
And that's what it seems like more. It was just preference. But to see what happened in this first round is just mind blowing. 8 players came out of the USA under 18 program. That's got to be unprecedented to have one program. I mean, granted, it is not like one junior team
Right.
from the Canadian junior leagues, but it's 8 players out of one program. That is unreal.
Yeah, that's
in one
absolutely,
round.
absolutely. It's just insane that it was that deep. And part of it is, I think part of it really is the fact that it wasn't a deep draft, that you're looking at strong teams like that developmental program team. And you can say, all right, well, this team dominated in such a fashion where just all of them have the potential, and a lot of them were first round draft picks this year. I'm really curious to see how this lays out in the sense of, were some of these players drafted in the first round because of the weak draft? Like, are they a product of themselves? Like, are the guys like Jack Hughes, Alex Turcotte, Trevor Zegras? There we go, Trevor Zegras, the goalie Spencer Knight. I mean, are they leading the charge to where the other players around them look better than they truly are? They're so young that it's way too early to determine that. But I think that this could be, like a generational draft, in the sense of, boy, if they really are all the real deal, holy moly, we will look back on this U.S. developmental program and go, man, that's the gold standard.
And when you do see this, and if it does work out, my goodness, how huge is that? That's like beyond like freaking like the London Knights, who have been highly touted for years in the
Right.
OHL.
Or the Erie Otters, the year that they won with Connor McDavid, and they had Dylan Strome and Alex DeBrincat and Taylor Radish and just all kinds of players on that team, and they didn't do what the U.S. developmental program did tonight. And we're talking about 8 players who were drafted in the first round. There's still Bobby Brink and Arthur Kaliev, who are also in that program, who weren't drafted in the first round and were projected to do so. So they could have been 1/3 of the first round would have been from that program. It almost was.
And that's unbelievable. And I know I was looking at Hockey Jerk's tweets too, and he's been kind of surprised at some of the place that's down there, you know. What was it, Lavoie? And forgive me.
Raphael Lavoie, yeah.
Yeah, Lafayette Lavoie and Kaliev just looks like he was just devastated when they were talking about when they showed him.
Definitely, he definitely had the bitter beer face going on. I mean, I thought that Cole Caulfield was looking pretty annoyed,
Yeah,
almost annoyed in the sense of, oh boy, this guy's gonna go out and freaking show us something next year. Like, he had that look on his face, like, I'm gonna prove all these people wrong for selecting me, waiting till I'm 15th overall, kind of thing.
right.
But yeah, Kaliev was the same thing. It's going to be, I don't know. For me, that wasn't so surprising. I've always erred on the side against the poor work ethic players.
Mhm.
And now, granted, that usually doesn't even end up mattering. As Hockey Jerk will tell you, Matt Barzal was one of those players, and he's all world now. So
That's true.
Arthur Kaliev definitely could go out and be the next Matt Barzal. You never know. But then there are also players like last year, Klim Kostin, who was kind of similar. He fell a lot, and he was a player who I decided to take the chance of, or was it 2 years ago? I don't even remember at this point. There's been so many drafts I've followed, but a player with such a skill set that I said, all right, this is the year I finally am going to not listen about the work ethic, blah, blah, blah. And when I saw him this year, I was not impressed whatsoever. So I won't say it's a crapshoot, because I mean, what the hell is the point of drafting and trading for draft picks and whatnot if it's a crapshoot? But the educated guesses can still be dead wrong or dead right at times, you know.
Absolutely. I mean, I would think maybe like Nick Benino, if anything.
Yeah, Nick Bonino,
Yeah.
a player who was what, a 5th-round pick, if I'm not mistaken,
I
or
think it was something like that, and he was a part of a throwaway last minute deal to get the Sharks over the top 10 years ago for Travis Moen and Kent Huskins, and all
but
he's done is won a
yeah.
won a Stanley Cup.
And in between the draft and the trade, he won a NCAA national championship and scored the game-winning goal in overtime. But the ups and downs, the peaks and valleys of a professional hockey player or a professional athlete.
Definitely.
But yeah, just talking about some draft picks here. I mean, Bowen Byram to Colorado, that was a little bit of a surprise to me, just because I know Tyson Barrie has had trade rumors for years, and they have Cale Makar, and they have some other Connor Timmins is another prospect on the blue line for the Avalanche that we'll be hearing a lot of. But to draft another defenseman was just mind-boggling to me. And really, that was one of the cases where you take the best player who's available on the board. And even though I did have Turcotte third, overall I had Byram fourth on my list. So him going fourth overall makes sense to me. It's just now I think this really says a lot about Tyson Barrie's future aspects in Colorado. So that was one for me, Eric.
Mhm.
Another one was, I know I had something to say about Cole Caulfield, but I can't think of it right now. But Trevor Zegras, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, hold on, for Cole Caulfield, and just say, so with them drafting another defenseman and with Makar already there, is Barry gone? And if so, where do you think he could end up? Because that could be part of the storyline going into tomorrow. Although, listening to TSN 1040's coverage of the draft, apparently, reportedly, I should say, some GMs are upset that the cap number hasn't come out, so they can't make any moves at the moment.
Yeah, that's a great point. There were a lot of GMs on the floor discussing. I mean, we saw the reports throughout the day on Twitter, especially pre-draft. Eric, you and I had a conversation about a friend of mine who was at the draft, who was right there next to Kyle Dubas and David Poyle, who were discussing openly a PK Subban trade to Toronto. And that obviously didn't come to fruition. So, I mean, I definitely think that salary cap, especially for those two GMs,
Big time.
the salary cap definitely comes into play here, and it could stifle some trade talks here. I think that, and especially because I believe teams have the ability to start talking with UFAs on Monday, if I'm not Sunday, yeah, the 23rd. So it is pretty crazy that info is not out there. I have to think they'd have some semblance of an idea of the cap. I mean, there are the rumors that get publicized, but I have to think the GMs have to have some inside information on this. But for the trades tomorrow, Tyson Barrie, PK Subban, I can't see either of those guys going unless there's straight hockey deals for other players, because your first round picks for this year are obviously out of the equation at this point, and those type of players are not going to go for a second, a third, and a player. I mean, it'd have to be player for player and maybe a pick next year kind of deal. So those, I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't hear about it until late June or even after free agency starts.
Which is very interesting to have that go on after free agent frenzy.
Yeah.
But getting back to the draft, where were your, kind of go over it. I mean, with the first two, Jack Hughes to New Jersey, not a big surprise there. And then Capo Caco,
I'll tell you
Rangers.
what, Eric, I was kind of surprised or excited watching the first two picks, because I'm going to be in New York the first basically opening night of the NHL season, and I'm trying to go to a Rangers game, and I was like, ooh, I could see Capo Caco's first NHL game. That would be cool. And then the very next night in New Jersey, maybe I could go see Jack Hughes' first NHL game. So just for a personal standpoint, that was cool how that fell together. But yeah, then you had Kirby Dack third overall. He's the player I'm not a big fan of. I actually had him 14th. I know he was very high on everyone's lists. I'm not afraid to go off the board, and in this case, I had him as my 14th best player because I just don't think the work ethic is there, and I like to predict busts as I like to predict stars. And I just don't see it with that kid. So he goes third overall to Chicago. And you know what? I don't even feel bad about that because Chicago's had so much good luck go to them the last few years in the draft that if Kirby Dack were to bust, for example, they're not going to be harmed by it.
Right.
And then you've got Byram as fourth, as I mentioned. That's a solid pickup for Colorado. Alex Turcotte, who I think is the third best player at 5. There's really no holes in his game either. It's just the top end talent isn't as high as Hughes and Kako. But then just kind of all over the board. Moritz Seider was a surprise.
Wow, was that ever? I mean, you heard the crowd reaction and
yeah.
Whoa.
I actually thought that was one of the coolest moments. I think the coolest moment of the draft was when Tampa Bay drafted Nolan Foote, and they openly said on comments, "They've got 2 feet. They have 2 feet on the line." That was my favorite moment of the draft. But my second favorite moment of the draft was Moritz Seider getting drafted to Detroit, because you could tell that this crowd was very in the know. They knew who these prospects were, even, or at least had done a little bit of homework on them, and were ready to go and ready to enjoy watching this draft. So when Seider went 6th, huge eruption, like in gasp on the crowd. And even the look on Seider and Seider's mother's face were just priceless. But I didn't think it was so far off the board. I mean, you've got a big German defenseman, or we'll just say a big defenseman who's extremely mobile and can shut down the opposition. Curious to see how he does, in higher levels. But I trust Steve Yzerman about as much as I trust any GM in the league after what he's done with Tampa Bay. He could do very little wrong with that organization, and I think that is exactly what Detroit needs for an organization which the last few years has basically made every wrong move possible, except for maybe keep Jeff Blashill, because I do like him as a coach. But so
and he came from Adler Mannheim.
Moritz.
Yeah.
Seider? Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, Hasso Plattner also owns the Adler Mannheim.
Oh yeah, SAP and Adler Mannheim have had a relationship for as far as I've been watching German hockey, which dates back 15 years. So yeah, that's a really good connection there, Eric.
Yep. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
no,
little tidbit with the SAP ties there. But at number 7, you had Dylan Cozens. What did you think of the kid from Lethbridge?
He's one of those guys where I need to go back and rewatch all this, because there's so much information to absorb. But I like Dylan Cozens. I don't love Dylan Cozens. So this is already where you start to have a bit of a drop off. I had him as 10th, so he's still in my top 10. But I thought there were other more skilled, higher. I guess in this, what I'm trying to say is Cozens is kind of a safe pick for Buffalo. They were talking on the broadcast about Buffalo needed a center.
Yeah.
And I had both Zegras and Krebs higher than him. I think that Krebs will bring it more night to night than Cozens will, which sucks again for us because Vegas got him at 17th. I think Krebs is just a very consistent player, and I'm not going to look into the Achilles injury too much for him. And then Zegras is just a player I really like. Another all around player from the USDP. But Zegras, I think, is just all world playmaking ability, and I don't know, when you've got Jack Eichel and leading up the middle, it would be nice to have someone slotting into 2C. And I don't know if Dylan Cousins, I see him more of a third line center. So that, yeah. So we'll see. We'll see. Damn it. There's another we'll see.
Now at number 10, the big pick, the big hometown team, they need to make a splash here. And they go with the Russian Vasily
Podkolzin.
Yeah, Podkolzin. What did you think of that one?
Well, at least I got one. So Cool Hockey had a predict your top 10, and I got 3 right. I got Hughes, I got Kako, and I got Podkolzin at 10. So there's that. I like Podkolzin. He's got one of the highest talent thresholds in the draft. For me, his skating's a little clunky. I know they were talking extensively on the broadcast about his skating's amazing. He's so agile, and I don't see that. I mean, he's very powerful. I think he's got a super clunky skating stride that might cause problems. He's too top heavy, and that might cause him problems if he's leaning forward too much and a defenseman just goes and lines him up and he's got his head down. But yet he's still, despite the fact that he's got, to me, so many flaws with his skating stride, he still generates so much power behind it that I think that's where he kind of overcomes the weird skating and then really just lets his skill take over. So I don't think there's a Russian factor here. I like the pick for Vancouver. I like that they went with a forward and not a defenseman, because they were another team where they were kind of rumored to be going for a defenseman here with this pick, and I'm thinking, no, because you've got Jet Wu and you've got, well, Yo Levy hasn't really panned out, but they do just, Vancouver's got enough young defensemen. They don't need that with their top pick. They need some scoring to go with Elias Pettersson. So, and the other thing with Podkolzin, real quick,
for that matter.
and Brock Besser, and another thing just with Podkolzin, real quick, is that he's got some size to him. And for a team that seems to be getting smaller and smaller, as Vancouver has, Quinn Hughes last year, there's a defenseman that, Quinn Hughes, super tiny guy. I think he's about my size, and I'm not a big guy, folks. So having Podkolzin out there just to kind of even out that balance, I think is going to be pay dividends for them.
Gotcha. At number 11, the Philadelphia Flyers were to select somebody. However, Gary Bettman went up there and said,
he said, we have a trade. He didn't say to announce, so I guess he just wanted to get direct to the announcement. And it was the only one of the round. And I think for me, I don't know about you guys out there in YouTube land, or you, Eric, but the draft felt a little bit flat this year. And I don't know if it was because of the lack of trades or just the fact that there were very few introductions. It was just, we're the Arizona Coyotes, and we're going to pick Victor Soderstrom.
It's almost like when Tim Burke would always make the announcement, like, San Jose selects Ryan Merkley of Guelph.
Yeah, exactly. Which, I mean, hey, that speeds it up. I mean, it's a 3.5 hour event, but still, it to me at least sound excited.
Yeah, like some people are saying on the chat, Christine, it was boring, like a tiger.
Was.
Eric, you must have been disappointed on the lack of to announce.
It was, though. I mean, I was excited because it was the draft, and I love following these. But if I had been 14-year-old Kevin, excited about the draft, hearing these new players, I would have just been like, oh, that was very flat. And
You
that
may
was very disinteresting.
it was quite interesting though, because usually, it's partly why we had this program planned for tonight, because usually something happens on the draft floor when you get all 31 GMs together. Something's going on, you know.
Yeah.
And I know Boston, when they got to 30, uh you know kind of showed around and everything and such. So
Yeah.
we'll see on that one.
I really think, guys, that we're going to get to July 1st and then just everything's going to explode because the free agent market's kind of eh. So, in order to overcome that, I think just trades are going to go flying. And I hope so
Yeah.
anyway. But we might be waiting here another week.
Right.
But yeah, so I think from this point on we don't need to get to every pick.
That's fine.
But what I did find interesting, sorry, I need some water here. What I found interesting here was when Philadelphia came up, I said, "Oh, Cam York right here." And then Gary said, "We have a trade," and I was like, "Oh, guess not." And then here we go to pick 14, and Philadelphia picked Cam York anyway. And I think that he was the second best defenseman in this draft. I think he's the kind of player that I look at the Ryan Merkley pick, and I don't dislike the Ryan. In fact, I like the Ryan Merkley pick now more than I did last year. But if the Sharks had been able to draft Cam York last year at 21, I would have just been dying in elation.
Right.
I just would, because to me, Cam York is Ryan Merkley without the baggage. I think this highly of this guy. He's an undersized defenseman who is just all world offensively from the back end, super mobile. And I mean, he broke the U.S. program record for points by a defenseman this year. And I think his defensive game is underrated.
AO12345 was asking earlier, is Merkley going to be a flop? And I think it's still too early about that.
Oh, it's way too early. I think that 2 years from now it might be too early to discuss that, because Ryan Merkley's still got another year of junior eligibility left. Then we'll have a year of him with the Barracuda, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, we can truly assess, all right, where is Ryan Merkley at? Is he the Ryan Merkley that should have gone top 5 in last year's draft, or is he Julius Bergman? I like him. I think he might even fall somewhere in between there when it's all said and done. Because go ahead.
I was going to say, Jerry, if in the chat, Merkley needs to live with Jimbo as an apprentice over the summer. What's the ETA on Merkley? So,
ETA on Merkley, 3 years.
3 years. That seems
for
doable.
NHL. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. And especially with Erik Karlsson back in the fold, what's the rush?
I completely agree. And AO chiming in just now, I just don't want another Merkel Wheeler. Yeah, we don't need to rush him in right now. You have hopefully Heed. If not Heed, then you're gonna have Joachim Ryan. Shimmick definitely will be back on the roster next year for sure. So
yeah. Let's see. I'm just trying to pick out Spencer Knight to Florida at 13th, top goalie, only goalie drafted in the first round, and the only goalie drafted in the first round in the past at least 2 years. I thought it was interesting, Eric, just because they drafted Sam Montembeault, I believe 3 years ago, and he was one of the highest rated goalies in that draft. And he was an AHL All-Star this year. He got his first NHL win against the Sharks, I believe. He at least played his. No, he did. He did not. But I know that in one of his very first games, he did beat the Sharks.
Of course he did. Come on.
Of course he did. But so I don't know where this puts him. Florida definitely has goaltending issues with Roberto Luongo likely retiring. James Reimer was supposed to be the heir apparent. That's why they signed him to that big money deal. Was
Right.
Roberto Luongo? They expected Roberto Luongo to only have about 2 good years left, and then Reimer would come in for years 3, 4, and 5 of his contract and take over as number one. But Reimer has had just as many injury issues as Luongo has in this time, to where he's pretty much out at this point. So,
and heck, they had to use at one time former Shark Harry Sateri a year or two ago.
That's right. Yeah, that and Harry Sateri, I believe, has gone back to the KHL for the upcoming season as well. So, toodles. But so that was a good management pick to me for Spencer Knight, because you've got Montembeault, you had Ryan Bednard, who was a top NCAA goalie this year, who I thought was fantastic for, I believe, Bowling Green. But again, it's like you've got 2 really young goalies, then you got Spencer Knight, who's a future franchise goalie, but who's going to be in there in the meantime?
There we go.
Who's going to get in there to play the next couple of years before these guys are ready? So Florida, I'm expecting to be right in the thick of the trade talks here this summer.
Yeah.
You know, and you might even see a young goalie get traded. But so then I already talked about McMichael. Everything else, I think the back half of the draft kind of laid out pretty similarly to where I thought it would. Victor Soderstrom went a little early, but I like him. He's just a good 2-way mobile defenseman for Arizona. And
I like how I guess he's now former Shark co-president John Becker. Oh, I'm sorry, John Beecher actually got drafted by the Boston Bruins at 30th overall. I had to turn around when I saw that. I was like, wait, we lost our president. He's going to play in the NHL now? What in the world?
You know, I for some reason didn't put that together, but I keep staring at my list and seeing John Beecher and thinking like I've typed something in wrong. And I'm like, no, that's it. And now, thank you, Jonathan Becker. That's exactly where my mind is just like, this is wrong. Oh, wait, this is right. LA drafted Tobias Bjornfot at 22nd overall. That was a pretty good pick. I think he's a safe defenseman pick, but he's just, you don't necessarily have to get the flashiest guys with these first round picks. I mean, Manny Malhotra is a great example of that. I mean, he was a top 10 pick. And when you think about top 10 picks, especially nowadays where top 10 picks are usually all skill, all flash, just incredible talent, and you go, Manny Malhotra was a top 10 pick, but he ended up becoming a super solid NHL player, as we know.
Absolutely.
In his own way. So Bjorn Futt's a player like that where it's like, it's not the sexiest pick, but you know what? I don't think it was bad. I think LA had a very strong first round.
Yeah. With the pick that was originally belonging to San Jose, it went to Buffalo as part of the Evander Kane trade, but then Buffalo traded that for, I believe that was Montour at the deadline this past March. Anaheim takes Braden Tracy at the 29th pick. So of course there's always that little thing in your head that is like, okay, let's see what this guy turns out to be, because we've seen some of these picks where it's turned into
Max Pacioretty,
right? Or what was it, David Perron or some sort. So always interesting on that one there.
Yeah.
The Sharks are at 41 for round 2 tomorrow. What do you? I mean, I know it's kind of you say it's like a crapshoot a little bit, but what do you think they need to get? What do you think they should get? And if you know a name, throw it out there.
All right. So the name that, and I swear it's not because of like name science or anything, but the name that I have not been able to get out of my head at this pick is Alex Vlasic.
AJ just mentioned that Alex Vlasic.
I don't know what it is because even before the Sharks acquired this second round pick a month ago, in my head I kept thinking Doug Wilson's going to trade up and get Alex Vlasic. Now Alex Vlasic is a 6'6" beanpole defenseman. I need to do more homework as to. I know he's a part of again that U.S. development program. But for me, I feel like the Sharks need to get a sizable defensive defenseman. And again, this is essentially the anti-Ryan Merkley. So while those type of picks generally get a groan from the crowd, just because it's like, oh man, this guy put up 2 goals and 7 points. Now Vlasic had 4 goals and 23 assists. So decent numbers for the program. But he even at 6'6", though, the scouting report is that his skating's fine. So I think at this point in the NHL, you can't have slow big defensemen. You have to at least have average speed big defensemen like Jake Middleton, for example. Obviously, a player who LA let go. He's not as big as Vlasic, but Middleton's still 6'3". And the reason why Middleton has gone from being a 7th round pick that was let go by LA and picked up on tryout by the Sharks and then made it to the NHL last year is just because he's a 6'3" defenseman who's mobile. So I don't think he's got a super high ceiling, but still he's ahead of the curve in that respect. So I feel like what the Sharks need is another sizable defenseman who's got a bigger ceiling defensively than Middleton, for example. A guy who can go in and be maybe a number 4, number 5 defenseman, but he's a solid 700 game,
Right.
maybe chips in 3 goals a year, but you don't have to worry about him on the back end. And I feel like that's where the Sharks need to try and look. So Alex Vlasic is where I'm going with this.
Gotcha. And here's my thing, and I kind of mentioned it earlier in the week. With the Blues winning the cup and how they won it, with the toughness, the hitting, and the grittiness, as opposed to last year, everybody, and going into this season, everybody was trying to get the speedsters. They really didn't care about the size of the player. It was all about the speed and skill and how goal scoring was going up and everything. Do you think it's kind of changed to where now it's more of that trying to find that tall guy that can hit along with contributing offensively?
Yeah, that's the key there is the Stanley Cup winners always dictate the next year's trend. When Pittsburgh won the cup, everyone wanted to get fast. And look at Vegas. Vegas made it to the finals with that fast team, but they ended up losing. And then now you've got St. Louis, who's more of a rugged team. And I think it's just cyclical. So yeah, right now you could say that getting larger, getting more tough, getting in the trenches, whatnot. That's the trend right now. But when you're dealing with drafting, I think too much is made of draft for this season. Like you hear, is this player NHL ready now? And that drives me freaking nuts because it's like it's still an 18-year-old or 19-year-old kid. Like if you're expecting that kid to lead your team to the Stanley Cup next year, then you should be fired as GM. There's a reason why you're drafting so low, so high in the draft. Like, so for me, teams who recognize the current cycles and anticipate the future cycles, those are the teams that draft well. So like, okay, we're trending towards a more physical, I won't say slower, but just a more physical game right now. let's draft now for beyond that. And I have said that the past few years, you've seen players like Cole Caulfield, players who are 5'8", 5'9" speedsters, and Patrick Kane type players, and that's awesome. But what happens when you get a league of 6'3" guys who stick handle like Patrick Kane and skate like Patrick Kane? Oh my goodness, that's going to be insane. And I think that's really where the player pool isn't there yet. Most of the guys right now are in the 5'10" to 6'1" range. But if you can pick up a few guys who are 6'2", 6'3" on both ends, forward and defense, who are mobile as hell, you're going to wipe out those 5'11" teams who are also mobile as hell.
Right.
So,
all right. Well, let's jump into the chat. We'll kind of make this a little rapid fire, bud.
yeah.
You ready? All right.
Yeah, I've been trying to get the chat up here, so
I'll just keep feeding it to you. So first off, Anthony Sanchez says, "How about Vlasic's cousin?" Now, I don't know. Is that the case? Is this actually his cousin or not, or we just kind of?
As far as I'm aware, there is absolutely no relation.
Gotcha.
I don't believe there's any relation at all.
Got
It's like Ryan Merkley and Nick Merkley, who have absolutely no relation at all, and that's the one that really boggles my mind. Wow.
Laurel also asking, are scouts allowed to be subjective, or do they have to be purely objective when it comes to bringing a player to a team's attention?
Oh, I think it absolutely can be subjective, because it's never good to be closed-minded about potential. And I think that a player like Linus Karlsson last year, for example, now he's a player we've already traded, but he was a third-round pick last year. I would love to know what scout decided that he was worth the third-round pick. And I know I'm saying that in a negative light, but I mean, that took balls to make that pick and to trade up and take that player, for example. I can't imagine he was on many teams' draft boards, or even other scouts within the organization, their draft board. So clearly someone said, this player has this, and convinced Tim. Was Tim Burke still in charge last year? Because I feel like Doug Wilson Jr. came after the draft.
It was like they did the draft, then they had their development camp. I distinctly remember AJ and I, when we interviewed Doug Wilson last year, the day of the prospect scrimmage, AJ literally set him up. Is there anything else you want to add or say? And he said, "No, I just love enjoying talking hockey with people." The next day,
I remember that. Yeah.
next day he changes, it makes Tim Burke his assistant GM, and his son the head of scouting. So
yeah.
That Doug Wilson, keep an eye on him. He holds his cards very close to his chest.
But I think that you absolutely need to keep your mind open to any possibility, even if you think it's dumb. If someone has a convincing argument, you still might collectively decide, okay, that's worth a shot. That player's worth a shot.
Definitely. Talk about Caulfield with the Habs. Could he make it, or will he just do the 8, 9, 10 games that you're allowed to, and then get sent back down to juniors?
I think Montreal needs enough help at forward that he very, very well could stick around next year in the NHL for a full season, and I actually kind of think he will. I think the scoring touch is there, like really there for him. So I don't think I am curious to see how he does against pros with that size, but I definitely think he's got the skill to play in the NHL. And with Montreal's youth push with Kakaniemi, and Suzuki will be coming in soon and whatnot, and Paling's going in next year, so I could see Caulfield sticking around.
Gotcha. CD Dangle, does Zuccarello get re-signed? I believe We've already heard reports that he will test the market and will talk to teams starting Sunday. Again, Sunday, if you're not aware, Sunday is where you can start talking to other teams. It's kind of weird, Kevin, because it's like a full week of activity before they are even able to sign anything.
I'm not in favor of this, but I'm not working for the NHL, so whatever. Whatever I say does not matter. But to me, it's like, well, why do we even have deadlines? Why do we even have a start date for free agency? Like, if you're allowed to negotiate with players before their rights have expired, what's the point of rights? Like, I
Right.
just don't get it. But
And that's and you make a great point there, because now you essentially can't trade for rights after, essentially like right now. How are you going
and
to
I
get
actually
rights?
think that's why that is now allowed. Is I think that some GMs probably made a stink about play trading for, or teams being allowed to trade the rights of players for players who will never play for them again. But to me, again, that's the point of rights. But the other thing for me with the whole negotiation before July 1st thing is the off season is 2.5 months. Do we really need to rush rumors, Twitter rumors, an extra week ahead of the start of free agency? I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because it's almost like we get to Canada Day, we have free agent frenzy, everything happens there, and then it
And
kind of
then
trickles here and there, and
nothing.
then nothing for until we get to essentially captain's ice in
Yeah,
late August.
yeah. Which I mean is a relief to the people who cover hockey, but they get a semblance of an off season, and that's well deserved. But I do feel like, what's the rush? Like, even the players, like, what's the rush to sign on July 1st? Sign on July 18th. Like, get the best deal you can.
Yeah.
There were a couple comments in the chat. First, both Cheryl and AJ said, yes, Alex Vlasic is Mark Vlasic's cousin. So I guess that's a thing. And then CD Dangle also asked if, this is kind of off the board here, but is Pavlo Datsuk coming back next year? As far as I'm aware, he signed a new deal last week in the KHL. So I'm going to go with no.
Yeah, and if anything, if he did, his rights would be with the Arizona
Arizona.
Coyotes. He could be teamed up with Chris Pronger,
As far
but
as I
I
think
think
that
Pronger's
contract
already
has
gone.
hasn't that contract expired? Yeah, Pronger's gone, but I think Datsuk's contract's expired too.
So he could be an unrestricted free agent.
Yeah.
I also remember the thing. Would Gambrell come back? I think that was another one that we saw in the chat earlier.
Why would he not? Is it just a money thing, or
no, just speculation. I mean, that's
no?
possible.
I don't know. That'd be a terrible waste of a upper round draft pick if the Sharks just let Dylan Gambrell go. I do think that you will see some interesting moves with the RFAs here within the next week. For example, Francis Perron, obviously AHL All-Star. I don't expect him to be re-signed just because he just did not bring a consistent game. I wasn't that wild about Francis Perron in November when he was scoring those goals. I just felt like his overall play was meh. Kyle Wood, another player who the Sharks traded a decent prospect in Adam Haluka for. Alternate captain last year. I don't expect Kyle Wood to be back next year. And this is all just a numbers game. I mean, the Barracuda are, they already have 20 players or something under contract for next year, 18 players, I think. And that's without any RFAs being re-signed. So, Gambrell will be back to me. Gambrell was one of the best players in the system last year, and I don't think people should expect high offensive output for him. But I do think he could find his niche as like a Chris Tierney type player.
Okay. I completely agree on all of that. And I'll throw these out to you. Pavelski gets re-signed, right?
Oh my
Right?
God, sorry. I'm looking at the Coyotes because I was like, all right, they got Tatsuk, they got Pronger. I totally forgot they acquired Marian Hossa's rights last year.
Oh man,
And then
right.
I'm fully expecting them to acquire Ryan Callahan's rights. So, and hell, maybe even Roberto Luongo. Let's just go throw it all over in the desert.
Oh, and while they're at it, Patrick Marleau, right?
Yeah. Oh,
And that way they can
oh.
buy him out, and the Sharks can sign him at league minimum.
Oh, there you
So,
go. There you go. Oh, sorry. What was your question? Was about Pavelski?
yeah,
Yeah, I still think the Sharks bring Joe Pavelski back. I mean, I've been in the minority that feels that Brent Burns is getting traded, and I'm still holding to that. And I just don't see how the salary structure works with both Carlson and Burns on the team, and with so many other holes that still need to be filled. You need and I just keep throwing ands on this. Timo Meyer needs to be re-signed, and Dylan Gambrell needs to be re-signed, although he won't be re-signed to a lucrative deal. But I just, yeah, I do expect Pavelski to be back. I don't know what the money range is, and the longer that the Sharks wait to just, I guess, decide, if they haven't made a decision, decide on what they're going to do with him, the higher the cost is going to be for Pavelski, because I do think Chicago's in the mix. That's been rumored. I feel Minnesota should be considered in the mix for
I would think
this.
so too.
So, and even throw the Rangers out there, because the Rangers are never shy about spending money.
Oh yeah, of course.
So, and actually, yeah, as sad as I would be for Joe Pavelski to do the Rangers, I'd be elated because, as I already said, I'll be in New York for opening night. So I'll be like, hey, I don't know what everyone's problem is. I'm still seeing Joe Pavelski, but I hope he stays in Teal though, because he's my guy.
Yeah, and the other guy that I worried about, and I was mentioning this before you came on. The concern I have is that Timo Meyer gets offer sheeted.
Yeah, who was it? Was it Pashelka or
It was
Kurz?
Kurz
Someone
had mentioned it, and I've mentioned it a couple of times on the show before too.
nice.
I think I'm not sure about Marner, because Meyer would be more doable to give up a first, second, and third if you give him that certain echelon of price.
Yeah, that's actually a really good thought, in that maybe you get a GM who feels that all of the eyes are on Mitch Marner and says, "Hey, watch where I go. I'm going a different direction," and throws one at Timo Meyer. I don't think we're going to see any offer sheets this offseason. But yeah, I mean, there's always that chance, and especially when you've got Doug Wilson basically going out there and alienating all the other GMs with, Chicago's situation. I mean, this goes back to Chicago's situation with Hjalmarsson. Offer sheet Hjalmarsson forced them to lose Antti Niemi, and the Sharks, which I think the ultimate goal was to get Antti Niemi from the start, and they used Hjalmarsson's situation as a decoy. And then obviously there's the situation where the Sharks got both Mike Hoffman and then immediately traded him against Ottawa's wishes, and then got Erik Karlsson, and then the trade with Philadelphia for the Justin Braun trade. So at some point, I got to think the comeuppance will happen to Doug Wilson. So maybe Timo Meyer does get an offer sheet.
And AJ saying offer sheeted by Chicago to pay
You're
back for
right.
Hammer and Nemo.
Yeah, exactly. Stan Bowman, I hope you're not listening to this podcast.
No, of course not. AO saying, yeah, Niemi worked out so fantastic for us. Careful what you wish for. We're going to get Al coming on here to defend Nemo if you keep this up.
I still defend the move, even though it didn't obviously work out, but I
Right.
still defend the move. I mean, the Sharks needed a goalie. Everyone was all upset, saying Evgeny Nabokov's the worst goalie ever because he can't win a Stanley Cup. Obviously, all in hindsight, everyone's changed their mind again. But at that time, everyone was all upset with Nabokov, and go bring in a goalie who just won a Stanley Cup.
Yep.
Don't.
And Rocket saying Yemi has a cup.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's just Colin White, Michael Hanzus, players I was really excited about getting. Sometimes things don't just don't work out. It sucks, but that just happens.
Nope.
So.
All right. Well, moving onward, before we get out of here, what did you think of the new rule changes that are going to be coming in?
Yeah, I didn't look much into it. Basically, for me, since it is the off season, that I was dying to get to, my focus has really been on the draft. So, any, yeah, I will probably look into it in August, to be quite honest. So sorry, I don't have much more
No,
info.
you're good. You're good. It's just interesting how the number of coaches challenges that can be made will no longer be limited based on the availability of the team's timeout.
Timeout. Okay. All right.
Teams will be permitted to exercise a coach's challenge at any time, but with escalating consequences. So if they don't get it reversed the first time, it's a minor penalty for delay a game. And then second plus onward will be a double minor for delaying the game.
Ooh, you know what? I'm fine with that. Because I think that the coaches and players have figured out ways to stall the game anyway. With their stupid, I broke my stick on a face-off. Now I need to go all the way to the other bench,
My
and
goalie strap is broken.
Yeah, the goalie equipment. My God,
My skate
that's
steel
a
is
rule.
loose.
That's a rule I would like to see implemented. Is if your goalie has an equipment issue that takes longer than 30 seconds, he needs to go out, and the backup goalie needs to go in. And that'll resolve that issue real quick. But
the offside and the goalie interference is still there. There's now a third category that will allow the coach's challenge of goals called on the ice that follow plays in the offensive zone that should have resulted in a play stoppage, but did not. Gee, I wonder what they could be referring to, Kevin. I don't have the slightest idea what they're talking about here.
No, never. I think that the video replay just needs to be overhauled from the beginning. I feel like puck over glass needs to be a reviewable play. I feel that offside should be a reviewable play, but the thing of it is how they go about it. To me, if you can't, it's just like the goalie equipment. If you can't figure out whether a goal should be a goal or not a goal within, slowing it down to a quarter speed or an eighth of a speed, it doesn't need to go to 1/64th of a second. You think the game is being played at 1/64th? I mean, I know it's fast and everything, but come on. The guy's got an eyelash loose that fell to the top of his toe, and it put him offside. I mean, come on.
Yep.
But yeah, just replay. We'll find some other way of complaining about replay next year.
Oh, and trust me, this will be a big one too, because here's that first part was definitely the Timo Meyer rule. Well, here's the Pavelski rule, is essentially what we call it, or I think AJ put it in our chat, the Furlatin rule. Referees will be required to conduct an on-ice video review of on all major and match penalties, of course, not counting the fighting penalty, of course, for the purpose of confirming the penalty or reducing the penalty to a minor penalty. The refs don't have the option to rescind the penalty altogether, which I think is pretty good. They'll be consulting with the situation room in Toronto for that. The same thing for high sticking to see whether or not it was friendly fire or not. I like the example I mentioned was the one with Timo Meyer, I think in the middle of the Colorado series that we saw there. So, but another one that's interesting, helmets. You need to put your helmet back on. You don't have to necessarily attach the chin strap, of course.
So that did get approved. Okay.
Yeah. Line changes for a defensive team will not be permitted when a goalie freezes a puck on any shot outside the center red line. So that's interesting. Similarly, if the actions of a skater or a defensive team cause a stoppage by unintentionally dislodging the net from its moorings, the defensive team will not be permitted to make a line change.
I
And
love that rule. That I think they do need to do a lot more to deter defending players from knocking the nets off, or especially the goalies from knocking the nets off deliberately.
and
So.
AJ, I know you're watching. This is the Antoine Hudobin rule from a couple of years ago. And the same thing with this. If a goalpost is deliberately displaced by a goaltender during the course of a breakaway, a goal will be awarded to the non-offending team.
Oh, I didn't know that one. All right.
I think I remember the what was it, the Lundqvist like literally threw the net over before I think it was a game against Pittsburgh a few years ago. So
yeah, I've seen it. I've seen it a couple of times. I saw it. I know the AHL that happened a couple of years ago too.
Following a face
David
off.
Leggio, I think. Sorry, I'm just thinking out loud. I think it was David Leggio that did that. Anyway.
Face-offs following an icing to begin a power play. You know how if like the Sharks had a power play coming on, they iced the puck and the puck would be at center ice to begin the power play. Now it'll be in the offensive zone and they can choose which.
The funny thing is, I thought that already was a rule.
To have the face-off off in the attacking zone, it was, but on an icing call, it wasn't.
But I thought for some reason I thought last year they already did that. So I don't know. The helmets rule, real quick. The NHL is the only league, or was the only league in the world that didn't have that rule. So I'm not saying it should or should not be there, but I will say at least the NHL has decided to catch up with the rest of the world in that regard. So,
it's just the chat just going crazy here. Can they watch the video rule on something bigger than an Etch a Sketch? I completely agree with that. And I think what college has a screen in the penalty box, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see.
Yeah.
AJ saying new rule replay shown on Jumbotron. They use the volume meter to determine the decision. Well, the home team's going to get that one big time.
Wow.
After 3 rounds.
Well, the home team's going to get that one every time, unless you're in Florida.
Oh, and Barkov taking shots at Florida.
Yeah, that was great. That was great.
Rockets. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm not a fan of the NHL awards show. And I know, Eric, you wanted to do a show after the award show, and I immediately went, nah. But I heard that the award show was pretty good, so I did actually watch it last night, and yeah, it actually was pretty good, and especially the first half of it, and Keenan's opening bit I thought was hilarious, and Sasha Barkov throwing some personality out of it. See, that's what I want to see out of the players, is more personality. So I like that he took a cheap shot at his own fans, just to give some flavor and substance to the thank you to my teammates, thank you for my agent, blah blah blah. And so it was funny.
Yeah, definitely. What was the one that Rocket had suggested? Rocket suggested after 3 rounds of OT, the teams will allow the arena to chuck a puck to determine a winner of a game.
And in the 8th overtime, we finally have a winner.
Might as well let the fans call Toronto 900 number to vote for penalty.
Wait. Actually, that chuck-a-puck thing is just going to end up needing video review, because Frenzy always picks the wrong pucks on chuck-a-puck anyway.
Oh, that's true.
So
that's true.
Anyway, I digress.
But opening night, the Sharks will start their 29th season in the NHL in Vegas. And then 2 nights later, they'll have the second half of the home at home in San Jose. Boy, didn't see that one coming at all after Game 7, right?
Well, the NHL player safety better be starting on October 2nd or whatever day it is, and not waiting until October 20th to finally show up for work. That's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, and to which I think the Teal Town Twitter responded, well, then magically on October 2nd, John Scott, Scott Parker, and Douglas Murray have signed 3-day contracts.
Nice.
Get through. To which Scott Parker and John Scott said they're down for. So
Oh, nice.
Scott Parker and John Scott, if you are watching, contact us. We'd love to talk to you about it. So so with that, we'll put a wrap on this one. I think we'll be back to discuss the Sharks picks tomorrow. I know you guys have Teal tinted glasses. A recap on that.
I believe
Tomorrow
that's
as
going to be
well.
Sunday. Yeah.
Oh, is it Sunday?
Cause
Okay.
because I'm out of town this weekend, so I believe Sunday will be Teal Tinted Glasses draft review, and that should be pretty fun. I should be back in town by then.
Excellent. So with that, I will say thank you, Kevin. I didn't know you were out of town first off, so I appreciate you joining in
No problem.
as a prospector. I appreciate that essentially. Your final thoughts and where the people can find you.
The big loser of the draft today, at least in day one, were the Buffalo Sabres. Not because they drafted Dylan Cousins. That pick was fine. I still think it was a safe pick. It was fine. It was because 5 months ago, the Buffalo Sabres had 2 shots at the first overall pick. And when the draft lottery came around, they had 1 shot and the St. Louis pick, which fell and fell and fell and became 31st overall. Somehow in 5 months, the Buffalo Sabres were salivating at having the first overall pick, and it fell all the way to 31st. And therefore, they are immediately the loser of the draft. Sorry, Buffalo.
And they still can't get Gloria out of their heads.
So, and then they'll manage to somehow draft Taro Tsujimoto Jr. tomorrow as well. For those of you who don't know who Taro Tsujimoto is, look it up on Wikipedia. It's hilarious. I'm Kevin Lacey at Kevin Lacey 22. And like I mentioned, I will be on Teal Tinted Glasses on Sunday. You can follow them at Teal Tinted Pod.
Alrighty. Thank you, Kevin. I am, of course, Eric Cura. You can follow me at PuckGuy14. We'll be back with you in some form tomorrow to discuss the picks that the Sharks have, and hopefully there might be some. Kevin.
Hang on, sorry, I muted myself.
And hopefully there might be some
trades to announce.
Oh, thank God. That'd be interesting. And then we'll go from there. And of course, Monday we will, plan your life for the next 2 months.
Don't boo me.
Oh, if you did see the beginning of the draft, man, you know what? Kudos to Bettman for actually, going along with the whole thing. He's definitely having a lot more fun with it now, with the booing. So
for sure.
So you can follow me at PuckGuy14. In case you missed anything or you want to watch this again, check us out on tealtownusa.com or your favorite podcatcher, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and of course Spotify. And of course, hit that subscribe button. That's where you'll find all of our video content along with all of our interviews. We're definitely going to have a lot more coming up pretty soon. Of course, with the development camp this coming week, we should be out there for a good chunk of it, along with the prospect scrimmage, which is next Friday night at the Tank. So get your tickets now. $5, I think, a 4-pack or like 4-pack, or $10 for a ticket. 4-pack
is $20.
So definitely get out there. Let's get that crowd going again. That would be fun to see a huge crowd on hand for the prospect game, just to have a good time and get back to a nice air-conditioned room for professional ice hockey.
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot of fun. I love going to them. I've been to every one of them, and it's a treat. And you get to see your fellow Sharks fans during the summer too. So go check that out.
All with our fancy, not quite yet, suntans. So we'll leave you with this now. Thank you.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I haven't seen a sun outside of days off in forever in 3 days. So with that, we'll be back with you sometime tomorrow, definitely on Monday, and most likely on Friday of next week, to get things going, and we get to hope and prepare for what our roster will look like come opening night on October 2nd against the Las Vegas Knights that are slightly golden but play in the Silver State. So with that, we will leave you. Until then, keep it real, keep it teal, keep it real teal. Have a wonderful night, everyone. Enjoy the weekend.